Fischer. Welcome to the Sam Sorbo Show. I am being joined by my guest, Mrs. Fischer. Her name's Laura Fischer, but she goes by Math with Mrs. Fish, and she's developed an online curriculum to teach math, which is really quite extraordinary, I think. So she sent it to me, and I thought this would be a very interesting interview. So I invited her on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So you just decided 3 years ago, hey, I don't like the way math is being taught. I think I can do a better job.
It wasn't that I decided it 3 years ago. I decided it a long time ago. And it took a series of things happening where I just decided with the traditional school, I'm done. I walked away with the plan thinking that I was never going to go back to teaching again.
Right.
And
Can you tell me, just dive into what those things were that really kind of just irked you enough to say, no, I'm done with this?
yeah, my number one beef was, okay, so you're born in 2007. Okay, you're going to be in this math program. You're going to be in this math level. That to me is lunacy. And so the expectation was if you're in 8th grade, I'm going to teach you 8th grade math. It doesn't matter if you know your times tables. It doesn't matter if you know how to do fractions. This is the math that you're going to be in. I found that insanely frustrating than Common Core.
Okay,
And
so
kind of
hold on, because before we do that, because I want to park there for just a minute. So the idea is, and by the way, when you get to 8th grade, they start to divide classes. Even actually as early as 7th grade, they divide classes. So if you're adept at math, you're going to go into this class, and if you're not so adept, you'll go into this class. But the idea behind that is, by the time you finish 6th grade, whether you like it or not, you're done learning fractions. There's no more fractions to learn because you learned those in 5th and 6th grade or whatever it is. And so that is the only time that's available for you to learn that thing. And so by the time you get to 8th grade, you're in this math class, whatever it is. And if you don't know some rudimentary things, that's just a hole. That's just a gap in your knowledge. So your approach is different, right?
Well, let me just address what you just said, which was, if you think about fractions in algebra, we do things with fractions in algebra. It's just they're kicked up a couple of notches. You know, we're dealing with polynomials, but we're multiplying them, and we're in fraction form, and we're dividing them, and we're doing all these things. And without that foundation of fractions, it's more than just a gap. It's a foundational thing that you are now trying to build a building on, and
Right.
Yeah, it's disastrous.
Right. So, but that's what I mean is we're not going to go back and explain fractions to you. You had that in 6th grade, so you're done with that.
Yeah.
And so the student, and I know kids that this happened to, the student sits in the classroom, and because it was a gap for them. They didn't get it for whatever, maybe their parents were going through a divorce the weeks that the fractions was being taught or whatever. And they're sitting there and they're not understanding that one of the most basic components of what they're being shown. So they miss the entire thing, and then they get left behind. It's just, you know, there's just no way to catch them up, because in a classroom of 26 or 30 kids, it's going to be very hard to identify, oh, this child just needs some rudimentary help with fractions, and then they'll be right back in the swing of things.
Yeah.
All right,
And so with my curriculum, there's a whole bunch of stuff to unpack with my curriculum, but I do review the fractions in 6th grade. 7th grade really builds on the fractions. If they're used in complex fractions, there's a lot of stuff that gets used with the fractions in 7th grade, according to Common Core standards, which I follow the list of what's supposed to be taught, but the nonsense that we see in the curriculum, I throw out.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. A couple of other things about my curriculum. One is that it's based on Saxon Math, which I believe you're familiar with.
Yes.
Okay. So that incremental, you know, you're not going to have a chapter, and fractions are such a great topic to talk about.
Okay. But before we do that, let's just quickly review what Saxon Math is, because it is sort of its own approach to teaching math. And so do you want to run that down for us, what the rudimentary thing about Saxon Math is?
Yes, absolutely. So Saxon does, it's two components. It's incremental and distributed. And what that means is you're not going to have a chapter on fractions. You're going to introduce, and this is what I do, I introduce multiplying fractions. It's the easiest part. You multiply across the top, you multiply across the bottom. And you practice that for several days before you're introduced to maybe multiplying with mixed numbers. And in between, and this is the distributed part, on one day you might be multiplying fractions. The next day you might be doing the area of rectangles. The day after that, you might be doing, basic equations, maybe one-step equations with addition. Right now I'm thinking of the 6th grade math. And so you're practicing it over several days before we introduce the next step. And that to me was the absolute key of what made Saxon so amazing. And it got purchased. That's like a whole other show. Saxon Math got purchased by one of the big publishers, textbook publishers, and it's not aligned with the Common Core, and they're not updating it. And so as much as I loved Saxon, I couldn't use it if I wanted to, and I have reasons for why I want to be aligned with Common Core in terms of charter schools. It was like, no, I'm going to have to kind of reinvent the wheel here, plus putting my own spin on it.
Interesting. So, so I think that to sum it up, what makes Saxon and this was my discovery. So it's funny because I started doing Saxon with my first 7th grader. And so we had Saxon, it's called Saxon 8-7. And the book is, 5 inches thick. I mean, it's an enormous book. And when I went to school, I had to walk, and I hated the enormity of the books. So I would just not do homework because I wouldn't take the books home with me. Because they were too big. I have an aversion to these very, very large books. So when I first got the Saxon book, I'm like, oh no. But I have to say, I thought it was brilliant that every day, the problem set covers a ton of what you already know, not just the chapter. It's always repetition, always going back. And what they do with each of the problems is they reference the chapter that it comes from. And so if you're looking at the problem going, I have no idea how to do this, or, this doesn't make sense to me, you just turn back to the chapter that covered how to get that problem done, and you can have a quick refresher on how to do it. So Saxon, to me, sort of opened my eyes a bit to how to teach math, to one of the ways that teaching math, I think, would be really successful. But so you said you basically gleaned something from Saxon and put it into your own curriculum.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about the weight of your textbook being one of the issues. I absolutely agree. I always thought, why can't we break this into thinner books by chapter or whatever, so they're not so cumbersome to carry? Another issue that I have with textbooks is we're constantly telling kids in the schools, don't write in the book, don't write in the book. And they want to write in the book. They want to be able to, not have to copy the problem, which was another issue that I had in teaching. When kids would say, I need help, I'm not getting the right answer. And I would say, okay, let's first make sure you copy the problem right. I mean, I learned that at a very early stage of my teaching, is because it was an issue. So all that to say, in my curriculum, it's printed on paper, and it's hole punched. So the kids just have a single piece of paper in front of them that they can write their notes on. If they're going to do a long equation, it's printed on their answer sheet so that they can interact with it right there on the paper. I introduce a lot of really crazy ways of remembering things.
Like what?
Donald Duck fractions, one of my personal favorites. You may not have noticed that Donald Duck wears a shirt but no pants. Kind of.
Yes, I think, that's pretty standard. But what about it?
Okay, so if a fraction has 0 in the denominator, okay, it has no pants on.
Okay.
That is something that we call undefined. And when I introduce it as Donald Duck fractions, it instantly connects, because our memories, the way our brain works is that if something is novel, if something is funny, if something is weird, we are more inclined to remember it. And so I have that. I have washing machine for absolute value. I have KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, or keep, flip, change. What we do when we're dividing fractions, we keep the first fraction, we flip the second, we change the division sign. So it's a culmination. My curriculum is a culmination of many, many years of doing many different kinds of teaching, that I just feel like it's been a blessing to see how God has used so much of my career in coming up with this.
Nice. Okay, so where are you going with it now? How many years do you have of it so far?
So this is my third year. I'm doing the 8th grade curriculum as we speak. And that is, I'm pretty much done as far as that. I'm not going any further, and I am seeking other people who are doing the same thing at the high school level that I can refer my current students to. And then I am probably going to take Saxon's Algebra 1/2, which is a pre-algebra, so that kids who aren't quite ready for algebra, they can, I'll use the Saxon with them to prep them, give them that extra year, because I do very strongly believe that there is some brain development that needs to happen for people to really be able to grasp the abstract concepts that are in the higher level math courses. You might disagree with me because you were, a strong math student.
No, I actually firmly believe that, in fact, we start teaching children math, and some kids don't have the brain capacity or the organization in their brains to conceive of the concepts until they're older. And what happens is they're asked to perform at a younger age. They're incapable, and they're branded as, math stupid, basically, like incapable. And for that time period of their life, they are incapable, in fact, but later on they would be capable. But because we do age grading, they never really get the opportunity again. They're just the dumb one in the math class.
And then also the pacing, this idea of, okay, we have this and now we need to do this because we've got to keep going through that pacing.
Right. And it's 11 o'clock and it's time to go do science. So if you haven't gotten it by 11 a.m., you're out of luck. You better go seek some remedial help because you didn't get it in the time allotted.
Yes. Very frustrating.
It is frustrating. I've discovered that, people learn things differently. And I had a young woman who didn't understand fractions, and I have a hard time understanding people who don't get math, because I get math. It's a foreign language that I speak fluently. Do you know what I mean? And it makes sense to me. So I met this young woman who wasn't understanding it. Now, I used to tutor calculus, so I understand that some people don't learn the same way that other people learn, and they need a different explanation. And I can roll with those punches. That's no big deal. But this young woman, she's a young girl, and she didn't understand fractions. And so I pulled out quarters, because she didn't understand that 25% meant 25 cents on the dollar, meant 1/4 of a dollar. That's why we call it a quarter.
And I call it quarter math.
Sorry, what?
Math. I call it quarter math. Anytime we encounter 25 in our math problems, I tell the kids, it's this quarter math. Just think of quarters.
Right. And so I showed it to her, and like a year or two later, she said to me, that was kind of a seminal moment for her learning math, because it finally had some concrete relevance to her that made her understand that there actually was a connection. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I find so fascinating about math is that there are laws in math that apply in the real world. We know that, right? But there are laws in math that don't apply in the real world. And that is that they're purely spiritual, and they don't apply in the real world. And that, if you try to wrap your head around that, that's really quite astonishing, because it shows you that there are two worlds, basically, that there are
Yes.
two different universes, and math actually spans both of them, at least in part, right? And that's I just found that as an astonishing revelation, that I wish we could get across to students more,
Yes.
because it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And it's actually one of the great joys of what I do, in that I can show kids, and I do things differently. This is another thing that I do, is a lot of times I will teach kids the how first. Okay, here's the algorithms, here's the steps. And then I'll go back a few days later and I'll teach the why. And I find that the aha moments that the kids have are much more powerful. I can remember graphing linear equations based on like a real life example, like, this thing is growing at this rate and it creates this line, yada, yada, yada. And I'd feel frustrated. But when I went back, and my math journey is very different from yours. I went back and learned a lot of math as an adult, where I had some of the how, and then I learned the why, and I was like, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense.
Right.
It was very powerful for me. And so I make that a very specific thing that I do in my
Well, it
teaching.
just shows you that not every math curriculum really teaches math the way that everybody learn. I mean, not any math curriculum will teach math the way that everybody learns. And so you have to figure out how the person learns and figure out what curriculum might be best for them.
Yes.
You know, the standard equation for a line is ax plus b equals y. But that just looks like gibberish to a child, and so how do you get them to get to the place where they can translate it and say, oh, I can picture that, because it's
Yes.
definitely the description of a picture,
Mhm.
right? Which is it's a phenomenal thing that we can describe a picture with numbers and letters.
Yes. It
So,
really is. And one other thing on that particular topic is, I've had many parents, because they're homeschooling and they're insecure about teaching math. So they use my program or they'll use another program. And I have had so many parents say to me, I finally understand this. And they're excited and they feel empowered. And it's like, welcome to the joy.
right.
Welcome to it. I'm so glad that, your journey finally ended up in this place where you can at least see, some of what is just so fabulous about math.
Well, that's of course the joy of home education, is that the parent has the opportunity to learn things and
Mhm.
discover potential in themselves that they never knew was there, because we graduate high school or we graduate college and then we stop learning. We're like, oh yay, I'm done, cooked, stick a fork in me, and of course that never should be, but that's the paradigm that we grow up in, that you learn in the institution, and then when you're out of the institution there's no more learning to be had, by and large, and certainly not book learning, right? So yeah, you could go learn how to fish, but that's just for fun. You could learn how to play tennis, but that's exercise or whatever. Now with the homeschool paradigm, the parent is busy involved in the learning that's the child is doing. And I coach parents and I say, you shouldn't know everything. Like, the worst thing would be for you to be the college professor who knows everything and you're just regurgitating everything that you know at your child. That's the worst position. Really, the most admirable position, and the one with the greatest potential, is when your child comes to you and says, I don't understand why this is the way it is, or I don't understand this problem. And you say, oh my gosh, neither do I. Let's go find the answer together. And so you have the opportunity to model for the child how learning happens, and to show the child there should be no, um, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, I can't think of the word. You shouldn't be ashamed. There's no shame in not
Right.
knowing an answer. The shame is in not asking the question, right? So let's go discover the truth. And by the way, you become the child's hero, because they're like, wow. So my mom went and learned this with me, and we're a team. I mean, it's the greatest. It really is a great paradigm. But your curriculum is it online and then the parents print it out, or how does it work?
So the way it works is I print it, I ship it to them, and it's kind of it's been a very interesting learning experience in that I don't like sending the digital copies because I'm afraid of people just taking it, all of
Right.
my hard work. So I print it, I ship it. I teach using Zoom twice a week, and the kids do 3 lessons a week at home. And the lessons are also recorded. So if the family misses a class for one reason or another, they can just watch the recording. Or if they didn't understand something the first time around, they can watch the recording. And that has been amazing. There's a part of me that would love to go back to traditional school to try to make changes, but I have learned through my journey that that system cannot be fixed.
The
Uh,
traditional school system.
mhm.
Did I not see that you wanted to get into the traditional school system though?
I would like to see my curriculum be used in the school system.
Well, you have more opportunity now because it's all going digital and
It's a very interesting time, but I really do feel like, to me, in a perfect world, kids could use recorded, like Khan Academy or whatever, but partner up with their friend, sit and work through stuff together. One of my fondest memories of being in the traditional classroom was seeing students when they had the time in class to work on their assignments. They'd pull their desks together, they'd turn things around, and I'd watch them. They'd like, okay, let's do problem one. They do one and they compare their answers. And if somebody has a different answer, then they start discussing and kind of having arguments and going back to their notes. And that to me was amazing. In a perfect world, two best friends would sit down and do math together using the videos and talking about it. However that works. But I really do. I love your book.
oh, thank
They're
you.
they're your kids. And I am probably, after I finish this curriculum, the 8th grade curriculum, I hope to put more time into my website, which is Dropout. Encouraging families, kind of like the walk away
That
movement.
was Steve Jobs's message to the graduating class of Stanford, one of the years. I believe he got booed off stage, but he was saying to them, if this isn't the year that you graduate, just leave now before they slap the lid on you, basically. And the idea is that coming from the institution, you're getting a ceiling put over you because you're learning to think inside the box. And really the best thing for you is to learn to think outside the box. And so that was just a really interesting, if your plans are to advocate dropping out, it's kind of interesting.
And it's not that I'm advocating dropping out of school. Absolutely not. But I am encouraging families to stop looking to the public, the traditional school, as education, because I don't believe it's education. Or it's a mess. And the
Yeah, no,
things,
it's not education, it's schooling. It's a
yeah,
completely different thing.
it's a
I would
completely
agree.
different thing. And I would encourage families, if you feel like you're not up to the task, that's okay. Do it scared, but do it,
Yes.
because of the ideology that has made its way down all the way into kindergarten now. When my kids were leaving high school and looking at college, and I knew, kind of where college was and how much further it was going off the rails. I was not pushing college at all. And now when we see this ideology going all the way down to kindergarten, it's horrifying to me. So I think that's my next step.
Yeah, I like that. So where can people find it?
It is, and I'm trying to, it's through the locals. I think I sent it in my bio to you. I just started
Okay,
it
I'll put it in the link, in the links below the
on the
show.
website.
So
I'm spread a little thin right now writing the curriculum and trying to do a whole bunch of other things. But yeah, and one of the things I'm looking for is I would love to see teachers in the public school system sharing on that website some of the things that they're seeing in their schools, because I really don't think parents are aware
right.
of the stuff that's happening in the schools.
No, agreed. There's a lot that's going on in the schools that the parents are completely unaware of. But what's worse is when the parent becomes aware, at that point, it's too late. The
Mhm.
child has been exposed to whatever it is, and you can object all you want, but some things you just can't unsee or
Right.
unthink or unhear. And so just for the protection of your children, I advocate for people to pull their kids out of school and start the journey of homeschooling. Laura Fischer does the web. I don't know the website, but it's Math with Mrs. Fish, and you can probably look that up and find it. And the links will be in the bio. And so, thank you so much for coming on the program with me. I appreciate it. And
Thank you.
congratulations. I just want to say part of the reason that I wanted Laura to come on is because she saw a need and decided that she was just going to try to fill it. And I love that. I love that entrepreneurial spirit and you can hear in her voice, she's like, yeah, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to get it out there. And I'm pretty sure you can find it somewhere. I'll send you the information. And I love that. That's just somebody who just sees a need and wants to fill it. And she's been quite successful. She has a lot of people who are very happy with the curriculum. And I've looked at it. I thought it was fascinating. So I recommend that you take a look at it. And so Laura, thank you so much for coming on the program. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.
All right.